Top Med Talk.
Monty Mython here. As we prepare to move into the next phase of the COVID crisis, we're going to be widening our focus here on Top Med Talk. We will continue to deliver COVID-specific programs, but we all have a huge additional responsibility as we try to reboot normal services. So although this piece is not directly related to COVID-19, we believe it's information that is crucial to the bigger task of rebuilding the healthcare system as we learn to adapt and live with this new virus. Thank you to our sponsors and to you, our listeners, for helping us to share this important information.
Well, hello, I'm Desiree Chappell, and this is Top Med Talk. We're coming to you from the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists 2019 Annual Congress in Chicago, Illinois. AANA 2019 is a gathering of over 3,000 certified registered nurse anesthetists, or CRNAs, for the largest networking and educational event in nurse anesthesia. Now, this year, the AANA has partnered with Top Med Talk to bring the meeting to our listeners. I'm joined by my co-host, partner, and editor-in-chief of Top Med Talk, Monty Mython, for these.
Great to be here, Desiree.
Hi, Monty. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Now, I'm really excited for this next conversation, Monty, because we are talking to two inventors that are CRNAs. So they're from our anesthesia community. We have Diane Miller, who is a CRNA from Northern Virginia, and we have Jean Snyder, a CRNA from Williamsburg, Virginia. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I think that this is a wonderful topic to hear from our anesthesia community and CRNA community of women in our field who are taking the initiative to invent something and take something that you saw a need and wanted to do something more about it. So thank you very much for your initiatives there. I think that's fantastic. So diving right in, Jean, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of your background first as a CRNA in your practice and what you have developed and invented and had a patent for, I think is what you said.
Yes. So I've been a CRNA for 23 years. I actually co-own one business with a CRNA partner, and I have my own CRNA business as well. In 2008, I can tell you a little bit about ERMA. Yeah. ERMA stands for Error Reduction and Mitigation Aid. In 2008, the Joint Commission put forth the National Patient Safety Goal, and they said that they wanted anesthesia providers to retain all their syringes and vials for the course of an anesthetic, so that you would have them for easy referral during the case and know what you gave. The system right now allows for you to drop your medications and drop it into a needle disposal box, but it's opaque. You can't see what you've given, and it mixes in with all the medications that have been administered previously. When I saw that regulation come out, it made sense to me, but what I noticed was that we had no product out there that really allowed us to save those syringes and vials. And folks were saving them in emesis basins and plastic bags. And at the end of the case, they would gingerly dump everything into the needle box, but they were exposing themselves to Sharps injuries to do so. And I think the Joint Commission realized that as well. They ended up revoking that National Patient Safety Goal. Well, fast forward maybe about a year later, and I read a blog online from a mother whose son had died during surgery. And I can still remember that day like it was yesterday, because her blog was about the fact that it was very hard to figure out what had happened to her son. But in the end, what I saw was that an anesthesia provider thought they were drawing up a vial of Zofran. Instead, they drew up a vial of phenylephrine, which we usually dilute by 1,000-fold, and injected that medication. The little guy arrested on the table and was taken off life support the following day. And I still remember that ugly cry I was having. My husband walked into the room and then tried to tiptoe away because he thought, oh my God, I'm not going near this one. Yeah. But as a mother, my heart grieved for her. And as an anesthesia provider, I thought there has to be a better way. I wonder if we had retained those vials, that the provider would have realized they gave phenylephrine earlier and maybe been able to mitigate the effect of that phenylephrine. And so I went home and worked on a needle box, and I pulled the needle box apart and built a reservoir. So once you drop your vials and syringes in the top, the reservoir collects your needles and syringes and vials for the duration of the case. And at any point during the case, and certainly at the end of the case when you're trying to rectify your anesthesia record against your medications, you look back and see what you gave during the course of an anesthetic. And God forbid something happens to your patient, you can easily turn around, look, and say, oh no, I gave phenylephrine. Folks, I gave phenylephrine. This is why we're having this response in this patient right now. Yeah. No sooner than I developed this product and was testing it out with a bunch of CRNA colleagues, in in a market where I was testing it, and I hate to reveal where it was, a provider had given 2 vials of phenylephrine, thinking they were giving 2 vials of Decadron, and the patient died on the table.
Oh man, that is the tragic
Very
story.
much so, yeah.
But for something like this to come out of that, I mean, that you could take something from that story and help us as providers to give better care. I think that's fantastic. Wow.
So Jean, where are you on your journey?
So interestingly enough, Diane and I have taken 2 different routes. I work for a hospital system that is part of our employment contract. We have to work with their incubator. So I felt like I was doing my due diligence.
And what does that mean?
Medical incubator is that company that will take your idea and turn it into a patent and then move it onto the market. I felt like I was doing my due diligence, not knowing what I didn't know. I was pretty confident that they were going to be able to get me the patent and move the whole idea forward. I have a patent. They've applied for an international patent. But what I've discovered after the fact is they have no marketing. And they have no desire to move it through the FDA. So it's kind of dead in the water. And what I really need to do at this point is exit from my hospital system and then buy back my patent.
Oh, goodness. So you don't
do they currently have claims on your intellectual property as it stands at the moment then, which a lot of people need to understand if you work with an employer.
Right.
Well, sometimes it's a default mode that the employer owns your IP.
Yes.
You might think you own it, but it's often best to discuss it with your employer in week 1. To
Certainly look at your contract.
Exactly. And then the next one is if they're not getting on with it, to push them to say, can you release my IP?
Correct. But you have to leave the hospital system in order to ask them to release it. And then you have to pay back any expense they've put into it so far.
Oh, wow.
Or negotiate to do that down the line if you make
with royalties. Correct.
Yes. All right. Well, I want to get back to this in just a second. So, Diane, can you tell us about your product that you have developed?
Yes. My journey on this started with a 4-year-old who changed my life and my path forever. So one day, I was just minding my own business, going along, going to see my very first patient for the day. I was in pediatrics, all excited. And no sooner had I crossed the threshold to my patient's pre-op room that I was met with a terrified 4-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
She took one look at me. Tears started rolling out of her eyes. She put up her hand in a stop right there.
You're not getting into
motion. Started screaming at the top of her lungs, "No mask, no mask, no mask." Believe me, I am a child whisperer, and none of my tricks were going to work on this one. She was a retinoblastoma patient who had lost her eye 2 years before, so every month or 2 for the last 2 years, she had to come back to make sure that the cancer had not seeded in the other eye. So she'd been through this many, many, many times, total PTSD. So she screamed and cried all the way back to the OR, all the way through a physically brutine induction. I'm at the head. She still managed to almost kick my teeth out, even with 2 people holding her down. So as she was going off to sleep, I heard myself or someone say, just blow up the balloon. We always promise them, just blow up the balloon. And bam, that's when it hit me. Why don't we just give her the balloon? And so we got through that induction. I went home and made a prototype. And the next time she came in, I asked for her. So same thing. We went to the back. Mama doesn't even come anymore because she's just too traumatized by watching this. And believe me, many, many, many mothers have left,
in
tears in their eyes. So we get to the OR, and this time my attending decides to put her in her lap and kind of hold her down, and that was not a good move. So little Z, I call her little Z, she was fighting and screaming, snot's coming out of her nose. She was just beside herself. So I took my little prototype and filled it with nitrous and oxygen. And all I did was tiptoe over to her and just whisper, "Hey, Z, you want to play with my balloon?" We hadn't even gone over a thing. So she reaches over, grabs the balloon, puts it in her mouth, and starts breathing. And all of a sudden, this little screaming child starts giggling. And I was like, oh, my God. So I turn on the SIVO. 2 or 3 breaths later, she falls out. I'm like, oh, my gosh, put her on the table. We finish induction. The next month, I had fixed it a little bit more. I didn't have the whistle yet. So the Pediatric Device for Induction of Anesthesia is the world's first mask-free anesthesia gas delivery system. So you get rid of the mask, you hook up a medical-grade balloon to the circuit, and the top, the mouthpiece, is actually a whistle. So as they blow, suck in and blow out, the balloon goes in and out, and it's bright colors, and the whistle goes woo, woo. So it's, it's tactile, it's visual, and it's auditory. So it's very good at distraction. So the next month when little Z came, I walked into her room, and this little child who had just been screaming at me to go away, now was like, the balloon lady, let's go back and play with the balloon. So we get in the back. And same thing, I fill up my PeDIA balloon with the nitrous and oxygen, and she snatched it out of my hand, pushed me away, looked me straight in the eye as only a 4-year-old can do, and said, I can do it myself. And she did. So that little girl put herself to sleep. And that night I went home to my husband, I sat him down, and I said, every child needs to go to sleep this way. I don't care what it takes, how long it takes. I have got to bring this to the world. And that was when PeDIA was born.
Oh.
And you said you're quite advanced in the process now. You've had
Yes.
your patent awarded and you have regulatory
Yes, sir.
approval. Is that right? Well,
So
congratulations. How long did that take?
Well, about a month later, I finally found a great patent attorney, and we filed for a patent pending, and that took 3.5 years to go to full patent. But I need to tell you that just because you file for a patent pending does not mean that it goes to full patent. Only about 40% of the medical devices that cross the USPTO desk actually go to full patent.
Yep.
So had I known that,
You might not have done
I
that.
don't know. That plus getting past the FDA, 89% of most patents, of most devices that go towards to the FDA are immediately rejected. So
we have a very broad audience listing, Diane, so I
Yes.
think we should probably just explain a little bit about a couple of the steps. For those
Okay.
people who've never, we've all heard of patents, but
Right.
for those people who've never read one, there is actually Google Patent, if people don't know that. So on your Google search engine, there are other search engines available, by the way, but there's one section which is Google Patent. You put a device or a name in and you come up with patents, and they're a pretty interesting read.
Oh,
often.
very,
They're very
very.
detailed.
But-
And we'll find yours in there, will we?
yes, you will now.
So we search your name, we'll find
You
that.
search
Fantastic.
Pediatric Device
And you'll
for
have
Induction.
your story in there and your diagrams in there, and you're given a number. That's one part. That's protected your intellectual property, your IP.
Correct.
And then that's great. Now we've got to satisfy these regulator people.
Yes.
And in the USA, that's the FDA.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And they have a bunch of people who go pick all over it and say, can we really prove that this is safe and has benefit for patients? And it's hard. They're hard yards.
It is.
Very hard yards.
It is.
And in total, that took you how long, those 2 steps?
Well, actually, going through the patent took me 3.5 years.
Yep.
And that was my lawyer filing, but I had to help him a lot because he's a brilliant man, but he doesn't know anesthesia. And so he, as you had mentioned, the Google search, wonderful, wonderful. It's not enough. So you hire someone like a lawyer to do a thorough patent search, and there are a couple different levels. So I chose actually the lesser expensive one, basically because it covers 95% of the patents that are passed by the patent office. And even if you get the most expensive thorough search, patent search that there is, the patent office is still going to find some obscure patent to try to, leverage against you,
Refute you.
because their job is not to help you get a patent. Their job is to prevent patent infringement.
So to protect the previous people they
Exactly.
get patents to. Yeah.
Exactly. So my lawyer and I, when the patent office came back and tried to dismiss my claims, we had to work together. But I am happy to report that of all the claims that they tried to dismiss, none of them stuck. So I got to keep all of my claims.
Congratulations.
Thank you. At the FDA, totally different beast.
Yeah.
So there are a number of ways you can speak with the FDA, and we talk a lot about that on our Facebook.
Bended knee is one of them.
Yeah, bended knee.
Did you have a Facebook page?
We do. We have the Virginia. We have
CRNA Inventors, Innovators and Inventors.
CRNA
Wow,
Inventors
that's cool.
and Innovators.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're actually thinking of starting a blog.
And that
as
next
well.
bit took how long? The regulatory approval?
The FDA actually took. Okay, so it only took 2.5 months
Wow.
to go from submission
To approval.
to clearance,
Okay.
but it took me 2 years of testing
Yes.
beforehand.
That's what I was gonna. That's what I was
Yes.
gonna ask. Did you have to do like clinical studies or
Not clinical studies, because that's not what the FDA is focused on. What I had to do were different kinds of tests to prove that my device was as safe as my predicate, which is the device on which my device is compared. And so I had to do testing, biocompatibility testing, which tests materials. I had to do compliance testing to make sure that I stood up to ISO regulations, international standards, and on and on and on. So
And this ain't cheap.
No, sir. No, sir. When people ask me how much it costs to, get a patent, I just kind of sigh.
The patent is budget dust.
Patent
We call it budget dust.
Yes, it is budget dust compared to the rest of it.
Oh, well, Jane, can you explain what that means?
Well, there's so many things that cost money. FDA submissions, the lawyers, the regulatory affairs consultant. So when people think the patent is the most expensive part of the process, no, it's not. It's budget dust. Mm-hmm. In terms of your total budget, you're going to spend a lot more money on the FDA and your regulatory affairs consultant, et cetera.
Oh, gotcha.
And your prototyping, did you go to an outside shop to get when you want to go to advanced prototype? Did you find somebody?
Yes.
You move away from the shed into...
Move away from the shed.
Yeah.
Just step away and get into, good manufacturing procedures.
So are we into
Yeah.
6 or 7 figures now of development? Without giving too many clues away?
Okay, so just to get through the FDA, just to get through the testing, when I first talked to my regulatory affairs consultant, because you will have to hire a team. If you think you're just going to have a patent and all these big companies are just going to be knocking down the door, wanting to, produce this, no. They want you to take all the risk. So I first went to a regulatory affairs consultant, and my first conversation with her, she told me that it would cost me between $100,000 and $150,000 just to get past the FDA. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's
significant.
Yeah.
Significant dollar amount there.
And that doesn't even include the business part of this
Gotcha.
venture.
And you're putting a lot of sweat equity into all of that.
Sweat, tears,
Blood,
blood.
sweat, and tears.
So because you're doing a lot of that yourself with your husband, all those hours aren't accounted for as well.
Yes.
So we're probably into high 6, maybe 7 figures at this stage.
Especially because at one point, my husband, he saw I was going to work full-time, coming home, reading federal regulations until I just passed out on the kitchen table. He finally said to me, Diane, you either have to back off from giving hands-on care or you have to give up PeDIA because you're just running yourself ragged.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. You've got to make a choice, difficult choices. Now, just around time, but just to be clear, the hurdle they set you was to say we have devices that do something like this already.
The predicate.
Just not your way, the predicate.
The predicate.
So your challenge was to say you're no worse than that thing and you're as safe as that thing. Is that right?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
The FDA is risk adverse.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they didn't
Yeah,
have
sure.
views on whether it's a nice whistle or not. No. Just had to be a safe whistle. Is that right?
Safe whistle, safe balloon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So the products that you guys had, did you have what other kind of support did you have through kind of your journey? I mean, did you have support from colleagues or the AANA or any other people? Or was it?
Well, certainly until the point that you have your patent, you don't talk to anybody. You got to keep your mouth shut. You don't reveal your information to anybody. So once the patent is through, for myself, my colleagues are very supportive of me, but there's nothing that they can do to help me to move forward until I make that next move and and separate from my hospital system. And that's okay. I think that the CRNA community, what we found on the Facebook page, is an awesome community of people. There are other CRNA inventors out there that have done some really admirable inventing, and that group of people is more than willing to support the up and coming. So if they have an idea about which I hadn't thought about before, when you make your prototype, you go to a 3D manufacturing company and they build your prototype, you have to have them sign non-disclosure agreements because they will steal that patent, they will steal that manufacturing process, and then they'll hold it against you later on. And how do we know that? Because someone found out the hard way.
Oh my gosh.
So all those pieces of information are coming to us through our Facebook group, which is very helpful for all of us. And honestly, if I'd had that Facebook group before I signed up with my incubator, I probably wouldn't have done it. It would have helped me to connect with those people.
So I was going to say, Jean, you've got, and these types of bodies are not that uncommon. They have different terms, but within your organisation you were working, there was an office there or some people or some access to something that was called a medtech incubator or accelerator or business unit or... And that's, I think you're suggesting people should do due diligence before they assume they know what they're doing.
And I thought I was doing due diligence, but not understanding the big picture of it. Yep. My thought was, well, once I get the patent, everybody's going to be beating down my door. It's okay. Yeah. But I didn't realize that was, again, that's the smallest part of the process. It's what comes afterwards that was so important.
But the key bit I think we touched on at the beginning, again, not everyone knows this, is if you're employed, it's not unusual that your employer owns your intellectual property.
Correct.
Yeah? So you might think you did it at home at the weekend, you might did it in the bath, but if it comes from the context of your work environment, they've usually got you. Yeah, then you can go a long way down the path and be very successful, and they'll say, oh, you know all those millions you just made? They're mine. True? Is that
exactly
right?
what they will do.
That is exactly what they will do.
What was your experience in that, Diane? Did you have
My experience was that I renegotiated my contract. And my employer, I'm not sure if they were being gracious, but they wiped their hands clean of it. And I actually had my contract rewritten, and I actually put my 513 and 510, my 513G / my 510K numbers put in my contract, just so that if anybody ever comes back to it and says, oh, we own a little piece of this, they've already washed their hands of it. So
I'm surprised they washed them completely.
I know.
Yeah. It's part of my job back at the university in the UK used to be to deal with all these types of things. And we would usually hang on to a little bit because it's a win-win. We've got skin in the game then, so we support you, so we're going to promote it as well. You make millions and I get a bit for my organisation. That's a win-win, isn't it?
It is, but my lawyer, I have a pit bull for a lawyer. And
so he got the money.
He did not want me to sign anything, and we went back and forth. And, so they wiped their hands of it, and I honestly think they didn't think it was going to go anywhere. Yeah. That's honestly what it came down to.
That's the story of the laryngeal mask, believe it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. I have read about that.
They were certain it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Oh, my gosh. Can you even imagine? Well, it sounds like both of these things are going to be so useful in practice. What would you say to the people out there who are interested in exploring different ideas that they have? Like, what would be your biggest piece of advice for someone just starting out?
Well, certainly at the very beginning, the Google Scholar and Google Patent are the first two places to start, because sometimes your idea is so good it's already been invented, and that will stop you from spending money that time and money. Yeah, certainly do that. And then the other thing is to don't budget shop for your patent attorney. Don't budget shop for your regulatory affairs consultant. Spend the money, because you're going to get what you're paying for with those folks.
Do you guys add to that a bit like they're using a whistle or some incentive to induce inhalational anesthesia in children? The first look, you might see a lot of things that look a bit like that. I would say don't let that put you off. Read it carefully, because you're allowed inventive steps, aren't you?
Right.
You're allowed to nudge the field on a little bit.
Right.
So don't be too put off by the fact you say, oh man, it says induction whistle. Look further.
Truly, to get a patent, it has to fulfill two qualities. One of that is that it has to be useful. It has to be practically useful, and then it also has to have an item of novelty. And that's exactly what you're talking about, that inventive step. Something that a person who has average understanding of your field could not just deduce on their own.
Gotcha. So you have to make a case for it.
Right.
And do you have worldwide patents for yours? Or did you go for US?
U.S.
Okay.
And my incubator actually filed for an international patent.
Oh, okay.
They're good at patents.
Yeah.
Because they don't, you have to have them for all different places.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And it's much more difficult once you cross the pond. I mean, you have to file for individual countries.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
So what's
labor intensive.
one of the I think we've all heard now about the blockchain, Bitcoins, the semantic web. If that plays out, you won't need probably to patent anymore, because you can demonstrate when you had if you documented the idea in something in a digital format, like you wrote it down on your computer in a note, the original thing is marked in the blockchain, in the semantic web, such that you can prove that it was your idea first.
Oh,
does that make sense?
It does.
So that's one of the big discussions, because there's a huge industry in patenting, and they're thinking, I don't like that story.
But it's no longer the case that you get the patent if you thought of it first.
No,
you have to file first.
Exactly.
It used to be if you thought of it and you could prove that you thought of it first, it was yours. But that's no longer the case. It's first to file.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. It's a complicated process. Well, it's great that you guys have started the Facebook page. What was that again? Which Facebook page?
CRNA Innovators and Inventors.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a support system as well in there? If people email you, do they?
A lot of people private message me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So if I get enough people who ask me the same question, then I will start posting about it. And that's why I've decided that through my website, I'm probably going to start a blog. And then once I get the actual blog set up, then people can just go straight to the blog. But at this point right now, I'm getting ready for commercial studies and clinical studies. So I have to put that on the back burner for at least like 2 or 3 months.
And is the AANA running workshops on this now for members?
Yeah, are you guys speaking?
We're speaking. We're presenting a lecture tomorrow. But in terms of, I don't know. Do you know of anything else that the AANA is doing to?
They're
doing
promoting
the Shark Tank,
right? The Sharps Tank.
Sharps Tank.
Right.
Sharps Tank. That's awesome. So they are doing a little bit to help. Yeah, that's great.
They're really trying to promote innovation. And as a matter of fact, just earlier this year, I went to a VANA conference, and the AANA was there talking about the new CPC and all of that. And so they brought up the fact that now inventors and innovators can get 10 CEUs for a patent. And afterwards, the speaker came up to me because he knew who I was. They knew I had just called the NBCRNA, and I was like, what? And that's because they started this right after PeDIA. They saw that PeDIA was doing really well because it's been blogged about, in overseas medical blogs and whatnot. And so they decided, hey, we really need to support CRNAs who are inventive and innovative. And so we're going to reward you for it. So if you get a patent, go collect your 10 CEUs.
There you go.
But, with PeDIA now, is that being acquired in the open marketplace now? Is there people?
We're close. We're close.
Great.
And internationally, I know you asked about the patent, but we're still in the works. And so.
And you're doing that independently, or are you seeking a big partner?
I'm seeking a big partner because it's funny, as Jean said, people aren't just going to come, knocking down your door. But once you get not really so much the full patent, but FDA clearance, they start coming out of the woodworks.
And if you can get the next step and get some sales and some revenue coming, then the numbers get much more interesting.
Yes, especially if your margins are good. So work on those margins.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Well, those are great pieces of advice. Diane, do you have anything else that you think you would say to someone that has an idea and wants to, start in this process?
Well, we've talked about checking your contract. That's probably one of the biggest things because most of us are working for someone. Yeah. But the other big piece of advice that I have is don't do this for money. Don't do it for money because that is not going to sustain you in this process. It can be a very long, lonely, dark road with many sleepless nights, and you will spend lots of your own money or your friends and family. So you can't do it for money because you could have the greatest idea in the world and it could still fall flat. You have to do this basically because you really believe in this product and you really have a little bit of inventor's blood in you. So.
Yeah, the entrepreneur, inventor type of thing. Well, one more time, Jean, the product that you have developed?
ERMA, Error Reduction and Mitigation Aide.
Okay, and if can people find out more information about it right now, or is it still kind of in the process?
It's still in the process. I mean, certainly you can message me or whatever way, and I'll be happy to talk about it. But at this point, they're not going to market it.
Is your patent published, though, Jean?
It is.
It is. So we can look that up and see the
can.
idea in your patent. So Google patent search will allow that.
Yeah.
And you're working it out with your previous organization, whatever it was constraining your IP?
I've got my exit plan in place.
Okay. So once you exit, you're looking for support and a route to market.
Yes.
Cool.
FDA approval first, then.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent. And then, Diane, your product, again?
Is the Pediatric Device for Induction of Anesthesia, or PeDIA anesthesia balloons. My website is PeDIA, PeDIA LLC.com. And you can go there and read all about patient Z and all about why a Brute mask induction is just so last century.
Yeah.
We really need to upgrade this. And pretty soon we're going to have the blog start from there and branch out from, just to help other people.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for sitting down. This is a very interesting conversation. I'm sure our listeners will love it. And I just love what you're doing as inventors and innovators and women in the CRNA community. I think it's fantastic. So keep up the good work. Congratulations on everything that you've done so far. And I hope that to that you guys are going to have much success in the future. So thanks again so much. Be sure to check out Top Med Talk. You can look at the show notes and we'll provide some links to the product and to the sites, and check out social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those good places to find more content from the AANA 2019. Thanks so much for listening. Cheers.
Top Med Talk. Desiree Chappell here. Just a quick reminder, subscribe to Top Med Talk. We're a daily source of news and conversation focused on perioperative care. We bring you all the latest talk from all the major conferences in the perioperative space. We can also be found on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we now have a free mailing list with special offers and additional goodies for subscribers. Go check us out at topmedtalk.com. That's www.topmedtalk.com.